Hello, once again, my name is Kombozekos. I'm the president of ACES. Now, ACES stands for the Australian Classical Education Society. Now, today I would like to introduce you to a book called Poetic Knowledge, The Recovery of Education. The author is James C. Taylor. So, those people who are interested in learning more about classical education ought to buy and read this book. The book is available on the web. It is not an easy read, however, it is a book that is brilliant and will really help one understand and explore what we mean by these words, classical education. Now, to help you, I'm going to be reading an article that's been written by Dr. Robert Woods from Kepler Education. And in this article, Dr. Woods quotes from the book, Poetic Knowledge, and also adds his understanding of what we mean by certain terms in this book. So I'm going to read you some excerpts from this article that's been written by Dr. Robert Woods. So here we go. Of the many fine books written in the past 4 decades offering a defense and vision of classical Christian education, 2 of the more important but neglected books are Poetic Knowledge, The Recovery of Education by James S. Taylor, which was published in 1998, and Norms and Nobility, a treatise on education, which is written by David Hicks. And in my next video, I will read you some quotes from the book Norms and Nobility. There are at least 2 reasons that these rich books are neglected. Both are relatively expensive. Sorry about that, listeners. And both are academically dense. With this in mind, I have composed an executive summary not to dissuade people from reading these marvelous books, but as a primer and guide for these important resources. Now, if whoever wants a copy of this article, please visit the ACES website, and I'm more than happy to share this article, which is quite long. I'm not going to read all of it. I'm going to read maybe 2/3 of it with you. So this article will help you gain a better understanding of this book over here before you purchase. Read this and then make that final decision to purchase. So here we go. A brief description of poetic knowledge. This book rediscovers a traditional mode of knowledge that remains viable today. Contrasted to the academic and cultural fads often based on the scientific methodology of the Cartesian legacy, or any number of trendy experiments in education, poetic knowledge returns to the freshness and importance of first knowledge, a knowledge of the senses and the passions. Poetic knowledge is not the knowledge of poetry, nor is it even knowledge in the sense that we often think of today, that is, the mastery of scientific, technological, or business information. Rather, it is an intuitive, obscure, mysterious way of knowing reality, not always able to account for itself, but absolutely essential if one is ever to advance properly to the higher degrees of certainty. From Socrates to the Middle Ages and even into the 20th century, the case for poetic knowledge is revealed with the care of philosophical archaeology. Taylor demonstrates the effectiveness of the poetic mode of education through his own observations as a teacher and 2 experimental poetic schools in the 20th century. Dr. Taylor, in Poetic Knowledge, calls schools to, quote, resuscitate a nearly forgotten mode of knowledge, end of quote. The immediate, direct experience and apprehension of reality that inspires wonder and awe is called by St. Thomas Aquinas Poetica Scientia, poetic knowledge. It is the first of the 4 kinds of knowledge that St. Thomas distinguishes. Another quote from the book. The recent rise in private schools and homeschooling are opportunities for the application of poetic education without the constraining bureaucratic requirements from state and federal education agencies. End of quote. The acquisition of poetic knowledge moves towards a celebration of the higher things, an invitation to celebrate the ordinary as wonderful. Poetic knowledge, also described as innate, connatural, intentional, and intuitive knowledge, is a way of knowing reality. It is a way of seeing what is seen, heard, and experienced in a manner that assembles, connects, and integrates reality. Poetic knowledge is the wonder of the thing itself. I'll repeat that. Poetic knowledge is the wonder of the thing itself. Not the essences of trees, but the stately presence of the hawthorn in summer is the stuff of poetic experience. When in place, poetic knowledge is the appropriate means of reawakening the intuitive nature of human beings who are able to know reality in a profound and intimate way that is prior to, and in a certain sense, superior to science. In reality, science simply makes common sense explicit, clear, and detailed. As a matter of fact, there are what may be called primordial certitudes that simply cannot be proved. There are self-evident aspects of reality which lie open to our senses and intellect. Aspects of reality so clear and evident that they do not need demonstration. It would be contradictory, in fact, to try and prove them, since they are all implied in all proof. Poetic knowledge can be seen in play when a child imitates, for example, the movements and sounds of a horse in such a way that he or she becomes the horse through his or her imagination. The child approaches more nearly the essence of the horse than by the study of either the scientific properties of the horse or by the study of the principles of its being. From a scientific point of view, this knowledge of the horse is not very precise, but from the poetic position, it is a knowledge more real than the scientific due to its vicarious experience of the object. Intuition is a kind of intellectual sympathy by which one places oneself within the object in order to coincide with what is unique in it and consequently inexpressible. Intuition means the movement toward understanding of certain truths prior to reasoned articulation. That's very important. Prior to reasoned articulation. Envision intuition as intellectual sympathy. Poetic knowledge is a sensory, emotional experience of reality. Imitation, the impulse to reflect, imitate what is a main way humans learn many arts and skills. Poetic learning occurs when the mind, through the senses and emotions, sees in delight or even in terror the significance of what is really there. There is something poetic, broadly speaking, in this spontaneous, intuitive connection between the senses and the mind. The delight in the discovery of truth becomes the controlling motive in all intellectual life. Poetic knowledge is a spontaneous act of the external and internal senses with the intellect integrated and whole, rather than an act associated with the powers of analytic reasoning. Okay, moving along. Poetic experience and knowledge is essentially passive, and listening is above all the gateway, along with looking to the poetic mode. We guide students to gaze on things as they are. It is important as teachers and students we remember that we do not merely learn about something, we also learn how to feel and imagine a certain way about what we are learning. Just a few more. As I said, it's quite a long article, and I'm happy to share this with people. Just to conclude, within poetic knowledge, there is also a special respect given to the role of imagination. Since the range of the imagination is not restricted to things seen but heard, smelled, tasted, and felt, since poetic knowledge is that knowledge grounded in reality, things as they are, the cultivation of this power is enormously important in giving the stuff upon which ideas are formed in the intellect, especially in an increasingly insulated society that spends more time inside, cut off from the world, inside houses, cars, aeroplanes, and buildings. And just to conclude, just a few more paragraphs. Here is a summary of poetic knowledge on Latin instruction. Latin should begin in elementary grades. It should be spoken by the teacher in the easy phrases and sentences that identify familiar objects. And Latin should be taught gently with lots of merriment. And to conclude, and thank you once again for your patience. The end-all goal of truly educating students, now this is important, the end-all goal of truly educating students is for those students to love the beautiful and practice the virtues. These habits of virtues are a means to the end of the cultivation of an inner goodness that will illuminate their souls. The post-Enlightenment, post-industrial institutes of education have given us factories of pseudo-learning where knowing is burdensome toil. For more than a century, the products produced have not been lifelong lovers of learning, but mindless, passionless, lifeless automatons. While many graduates from the American, and we could add the Australian system of higher education, I'll repeat that, while many graduates from the American system of higher education, it has functionally produced generations of labouring consumers, but very few indeed have been educated to live the full and abundant life. And if there's one thing I want you to get out of today's video, it's that last line. Thank you for your patience. Once again, the book is called Poetic Knowledge by James Taylor. It's not cheap. However, it is a book that you will love and want to read again and again. So those of you in the classical education renewal, both here in Australia and overseas, if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. Once again, my name is Kompazekos. I'm from ACES. Thank you, and I'll speak to you very, very soon. Take care.